Hello viewers, welcome to Turbo Tech, and inside of today's video, I'm going to be comparing all the iPads in Apple's current lineup, from the budget iPad 8, which starts at $329, all the way up to the super luxurious iPad Pros. So like the video, subscribe, and enjoy. So you may be thinking, why am I making a video about which iPad to buy? Why not choose which Samsung Tab to buy, or which Surface Pro to buy, or better yet, which MacBook to buy, since they have the same M1 chip, and can run a full operating system instead of just the limited iPadOS 15. Well, to summarize, the iPad just beats all those tablets in terms of either hardware or app selection. As for the MacBook, it's really up to you. For some people, yes, the iPad Pro is not enough for their needs, as their needs include programs or apps like Final Cut Pro that are not supported on the iPad. But for people who do not need those programs, the iPad has great alternatives such as LumaFusion, Affinity Photo, and Lightroom. If you can get away with that, then you can even enjoy the perks of getting an iPad, such as the better screen, advanced back camera system, Face ID, 5G, and other features I can't explain now, or this video will be an hour long. Also, you can get a keyboard case or other accessories to complement the iPad to make it more like a traditional MacBook. So, the tiers of iPad. In Apple's current lineup, in Apple's current mid-2021 iPad lineup, there are 5 iPads. The iPad 8th Gen, which starts at $329 for 32 gigabytes of storage. The iPad Mini, which starts at $399 for 64 gigabytes of storage. The iPad Air, which starts at $599 for 64 gigabytes of storage. The 11-inch iPad Pro, which starts at $799 for 128 gigabytes of storage. And the 12.9-inch iPad Pro, which starts at $1099 for 128 gigabytes of storage. Starting with the iPad 8th Gen, which has its pros and cons. Starting with the pros, of course, it is the least expensive iPad and arguably the best value iPad too. Inside, this iPad houses the A12 chip, which is more than powerful enough for most people. Amazingly, this iPad 8th Gen runs the same operating system as the iPad Pros, with the same apps, same functionality, and same everything in terms of current software. The iPad 8th Gen will be likely to be supported in software updates for the next 3 to 5 years, which no other company does. The only people who may want to skip this iPad are either gamers who want to play at max settings, artists who need more RAM for more layers in Procreate, professionals who need faster speed for exporting things, or people who just want to have a snappy experience while using the iPad, since this isn't the best single-core performance that you can get on an iPad. Basically, if you're doing something really intensive, stick around to see which iPad is right for you. Something to note is that the $329 iPad starting price is only for 32 gigabytes of storage, which, if you like to download movies, be creative, and edit videos, then you should get 128 gigabytes, since 32 gigabytes is basically the equivalent to 22 gigabytes if you count the operating system and stuff like that you can't get rid of. But if you are just a student and you do most things online, I think that you can live with 32 gigabytes. But keep in mind that this iPad is super powerful and probably can last you years, so think ahead and buy the storage option that suits you best. A downside of the iPad 8th Gen will be the design. The iPad 8th Gen has a 10.2-inch display with thick bezels on the top and bottom. Now, this design is somewhat great if you enjoy the Touch ID and the home button, but to some, this iPad's design is just way too dated. Basically, it's the same design as the iPad Air from 2013, except it has a larger display. A similarity between the iPad Air from 2013 and this iPad from 2021 is the addition, or should I say subtraction, of the non-laminated display. This means that there is a small air gap between the glass and the actual display, making it feel like you are not touching the screen. Instead, it makes you feel like you're touching a glass on top of the screen, which is what it actually is, instead of making it feel like you're actually touching the pixels. For lazy note takers who like to take notes on an angle, this is a problem because the display is not glued to the glass. This means that because the display is not laminated to the glass, this means that the strokes that you produce on your iPad will not be the same strokes that will appear. This means that the lines will seem like they're somewhere else instead of where they actually should be. The last con with the iPad 8 is the cameras. The front camera is only 1.2 megapixels and the back camera is 8 megapixels. This means that you can only record in 720p on the front and 1080p on the back. So if you like taking stunning landscape shots on your iPad camera, go with the higher end iPads. But if you can live with these downsides, you can save a bunch of money and snatch an iPad 8, link in the description for the best deals. And finally, for connectivity, we have Wi-Fi 5, Bluetooth 4.2, and 4G LTE. Now the iPad mini 5 is actually more expensive than the iPad 8th gen, even with a smaller display. The iPad mini 5 has good performance with the A12 chip, which, if you remember, is the same chip as the iPad 8th gen. One thing to note is that the speaker is basically the worst out of any iPad speaker, as it has a smaller chassis to vibrate through. There are two advantages that this iPad mini has over the iPad 8th gen. First of all, the screen is a laminated panel as opposed to a non-laminated panel on the iPad 8. This screen also has True Tone, which dynamically adjusts the color temperature on the device to match the color of your room, making whites always look white and reduces eye strain. The last advantage of this mini display is the P3 wide color gamut, which means that this display can produce more colors compared to the iPad 8, which has an sRGB display. Because it is smaller, it will have a high pixel count, making it a higher quality display in terms of sharpness compared to any other iPad, including the iPad Pro. The second advantage is the storage. The base model of the iPad mini has 64 gigabytes of storage as opposed to 32 gigabytes on the iPad 8th gen. The top storage is more too, with 256 instead of 128. The two advantages of the iPad 8 are display size and the appearance of the smart connector, which helps the iPad 8 connect to accessories that don't need to use Bluetooth. The choice is really yours. Do you want a screen that is smaller but higher quality and more storage, or a display that is larger, less quality but has a smart connector? And before I forget, this iPad mini has Wi-Fi 5, Bluetooth 5 compared to Bluetooth 4.2 on the iPad 8, and 4G LTE. Now, the iPad Air got its big refresh in September of 2020, meaning that it has the new design with the flat edges and no home button. But for a lot of people, the iPad Air is going to be the iPad to get. Its value isn't the best, considering the iPad Pro for only $200 more. But then again, for $200, you can afford a Magic Keyboard for the same price as the iPad Pro itself, which for some is a pretty sweet deal. It comes packed with the same fast A14 chip, which is more than powerful enough for every app on the App Store, but just can't run those apps as fast as the iPad Pros. The accessories are so much better and so much more expensive on the iPad Air. It has the Apple Pencil 2, which magnetically charges pairs and has a pretty time-saving double tap feature. The Magic Keyboard, which is easily the most quality keyboard case ever made, with pass-through USB-C charging and a great trackpad and keyboard. If you go with the iPad Air, you can find an additional keyboard or Apple Pencil for the same cost as an iPad Pro. This also has a better back camera compared to the other iPads, with the same 7 megapixel camera as the iPad mini on the front, but on the back it has a more advanced 12 megapixel camera. It also is the cheapest iPad to have USB-C, but it is noticeably slower than the Thunderbolt port on the iPad Pros. The A14 chip is faster in theory than the A12 on the other iPads, but in day-to-day things such as web browsing and reading books, you won't notice any major differences. Also, if you have the extra cash to get an iPad Pro, you will get some benefits such as better speakers, microphone performance, display, camera ports, and basically everything. Finally, the iPad Air 4 has only a 64GB model, which for some people is not enough. There will be a 256GB model, but for that price, you might as well go with the iPad Pro with 128GB and enjoy all the extra features. So this is Apple's best tablet, with all the spec bumps that I have listed earlier, can fly through all the intensive tasks that you may be doing on an iPad. Keep in mind that there are some differences in the display types between the 11-inch and 12.9-inch iPad Pro. Unlike last year, the 12.9-inch has a more advanced display technology, mini LED compared to LCD on the iPad Pro 11-inch. This basically means two things. First, the screen can go brighter. The iPad Pro can now output 1000 nits of full screen brightness and up to 1600 nits of brightness, but only in HDR content. In regular day-to-day tasks, it is still limited to the same 600 nits. The second benefit is that the iPad Pro 12.9 has a better contrast ratio because it has more local dimming zones and some of those LEDs can shut down, making the ones that are shining pop more. But I don't think that the 11-inch iPad Pros is bad, because it really isn't. Firstly, it is slightly larger than the iPad Air 4s, so it's 11 inches compared to 12.9 inches. And secondly, it has a ProMotion display, which means that the display can refresh up to 120 times a second, meaning that everything will be smoother. Additionally, it can lower its refresh rate to 24 Hz when you are watching a video shot at 24 Hz, saving battery life that would otherwise be wasted. Everything else is the same, with the same great anti-reflective coating, the same great lamination, and etc. The port has also been upgraded, as I've said before. Instead of USB-C, this is now a Thunderbolt port, which allows for faster transfer speeds up to 40 gigabytes a second, and the ability to output higher resolution displays, including Apple's 6K Pro Display XDR at full 6K. Charging times are still the same. I feel like this isn't a reason to upgrade for most students because the software is still limited to a few Thunderbolt drives, and the ones that do work are noticeably slower than on a Mac. Also, the external display on the iPad is kinda meh. It basically mirrors your display, and I personally don't know many people who have a 6K monitor. The speakers are straight up phenomenal. These speakers are beating out Apple's 13-inch MacBooks with 4 drivers that sound incredible. For price, the 11-inch iPad Pro with 128 gigabytes of storage is $799, as the 12.9-inch version is $1099. You can go up to 2 terabytes for both of these models. As for accessories, they are basically the same as the iPad Air 4s, with the Magic Keyboard, which is slightly larger on the 12.9-inch iPad Pro, which makes for a better typing experience but also more expensive, and the Apple Pencil 2, and more. As I have said, this iPad Pro has the M1 chip, meaning it has a desktop level chip inside of the iPad Pro. The 12.9-inch display will be nice for watching movies or just multitasking. The iPad Pro has 8 gigabytes of RAM in all the models, from 128 gigabytes to 512. But if you get the 1 or 2 terabyte versions of the iPad Pro, you'll be getting an insane 16 gigabytes of RAM, which, I agree with Max, is overkill. Finally, let's talk about the camera system. The iPad Pro has a 12 megapixel camera on the back with a 10 megapixel ultra-wide, a LiDAR scanner for augmented reality, and a 4 LED flash. The front-facing camera has 12 megapixels and the Face ID tech, which enables portrait mode. This new camera also has center stage, which is a feature that makes the camera follow and zoom in on you around, keeping you in the center. Finally, the iPad Pro has Wi-Fi 6, Bluetooth 5, and 5G LTE. So that's it, you made it to the end. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Make sure to subscribe, and remember that the best links and deals are down in the description.